Unlike the Joker or Two-Face, the Riddler doesn't really have that many classic, well-known stories. Even his very best stories, like Questions Multiply the Mystery and A New Dawn, are pretty obscure. The only truly big Riddler tales I can think of would be Hush and Zero Year, maybe The War of Jokes and Riddles. That doesn't mean Eddie Enigma is lacking in great comics though. There's plenty of them out there. Well, maybe not plenty, but they're out there, and if you dig real deep, you'll find some. That's what I've done, and I will now present to you 5 Enigma tales the fans in general tend to forget, and ones that I've myself never talked about before on the channel. As always, these will be listed in chronological order, and let's stop beating around the bush and get started with the list. Riddler on the Move, from Batman 263, published in 1975. The writer was Denny O'Neil and the penciler Ernie Chan. So this was actually the Riddler's first appearance in the Bronze Age, following the end of the campy Silver Age. It was, in other words, Eddie's big comeback. Except I guess it wasn't so big, as no one ever remembers this story. It's always been special to me though. It was the first Riddler comic I ever read. Yes, in one of those old Swedish reprints. Anyway, in it, the Riddler is planning to establish an agency for criminals. Basically, if you need a crook with a certain skill, like safe cracking for instance, you come to him and hire one. To fund this operation, Eddie needs moolah though, and what better way to get that than launching a new Riddle crime spree in Gotham? Well, there probably are better ways, but he is the Riddler after all. So there's actually nothing really special about the plot itself. It's pretty by the numbers, and the agency for criminals concept is never really explored. Why this comic is so great and deserves a spot on this list is for its portrayal of Eddie. That is fantastic. One of the best written Eddies ever. This is an Eddie who contemplates why he's a supervillain in the first place. He actually doesn't really want to be one, as it only causes him trouble. But he simply feels compelled to rob and riddle. He can't help himself. It's a sort of curse. The Riddler of this story also has a quirk of sticking up random people on the street and asking them a riddle. If they get it wrong, he robs them. But if they get it right, he gives them money. As stated by himself, he does this simply because his soul is in need of riddling, not because he needs to rob. It's really odd how Denny O'Neil could write such a great Eddie in this story, and then 14 years later completely destroy the character in his The Question run. Run, Riddler Run, from Batman Run, Riddler Run, a 3-issue miniseries published in 1992. It was written by Gerard Jones and Mark Badger, while Badger also did all of the art, including inking and coloring. Despite the title, this comic doesn't really focus on Riddler. The true focus is on a plot about urban renewal. A wealthy businesswoman named Donna DeForza plans to demolish a large slum area in Gotham and rebuild it as what she calls New Gotham, a clean, bustling business center free of crime and poverty. However, she does not take into consideration the countless poor people already living in the area who will be evicted and made homeless. Yes, it's a very political story, and basically a mouthpiece for Gerard Jones. It does feature a great Riddler though, despite the fact he isn't the focus. He's more of a wild card, an unpredictable element with his own agenda. Eddie has apparently reformed in this story, and being a former master thief, has been hired by the Forza as her security consultant. However, she eventually fires him when she gets fed up with his eccentricities. Eddie then finds himself targeted by the true villain of the story, the Forza's mad chief of security, former East German military man Frederick Olmsted. Olmsted and his squadron of Iron Men have basically gone rogue, and also serve their own agenda, separate from the Forza's. He views Riddler as a loose end and a threat to their plans. So Eddie is forced to ally himself with the only person capable of stopping the crazed commie, his arch nemesis, the Batman. Yeah, it's another Batman-Riddler team-up. There sure seem to be a lot of those. I wonder why that is. I'm not really going to get into the plot with this one. It's too complicated to cover here, and once again, it isn't really the plot that grants the story a spot on the list. It is, once again, the portrayal of Riddler. this is definitely one of the craziest Riddlers we've ever seen. Here he's truly obsessed with riddles and games. Everything is a riddle in a game to him. He even has a compulsion of not being able to divulge any information to anyone in any other form but a riddle. He can't just outright tell you what he wants to tell you, even when it would work in his own favor. No, he has to riddle you. Like for example, one scene where he needs Batman to come rescue him ASAP, but Batman doesn't know where he is. Instead of just giving Batman his location, he gives it to him in the form of a riddle, and Batman has to puzzle it out, despite the fact this puts himself in grave danger. Truly a unique and very interesting portrayal of the kooky king of conundrums. This is one Riddler who definitely belongs in Arkham Asylum. Riddle of the Jinxed Sphinx, from the Batman Chronicles issue 3, published in 1995. Yep, the same issue featuring Victor Zsasz' origin story. Anyway, this one was written by Doug Moench and penciled by Brian Stelfreeze. In the story, Riddler has done the unbelievable. He stopped giving riddle clues to his crimes. Yes, it's a new and improved Riddler. He now pulls jobs for Gotham mob boss Big Jilly, and this setup proves far more lucrative than his old riddle capers ever did, much to the joy of his henchgirls Query and Echo. However, the Riddler is the Riddler, and how long can he really keep this up? Naturally, he eventually starts to get bored with this new setup. After all, as we all know, for Edward Nygma, crime isn't about money, it's about having fun. And what fun is there if there's no risk of getting caught? And what point is there in pulling off perfect crimes when no one knows it was you who did it? If you know your Riddler, you may have noticed that the plot of the story bears a striking resemblance to the classic 1960s comic, The Riddleless Robberies of the Riddler. I wonder whether this was done on purpose on Doug Moench's part, or if he simply wasn't aware an older story had used the same premise. Either way, I kinda regard this as a remake of that classic Silver Age tale. It's the same premise, but considering it was 30 years later, it's a very different Riddler. The old Riddler was compelled to leave riddle clues. He didn't want to, but couldn't help himself. This newer Riddler does it for the challenge and the attention. He could stop if he wanted to, which he does in this story, but then there's no point to the crimes. I like both Riddlers equally, but when it comes to these two stories, I do prefer the old one. Still, this one is great too, arguably just as good in fact. If you haven't read either of these comics, then you've been completely wasting your life. You need to go read them both immediately. It's essential Riddler reading, far more important than your silly 0 years and hushes. Bad Girls, with double D's, I didn't spell that wrong, Lethal Pursuits, Riddled, from Detective Comics 705 to 707, published in 1996. This three-parter was written by Chuck Dixon and penciled by Graham Nolan. In this one, the Riddler escapes from Arkham Asylum once again, and while he's busy doing that, his two henchgirls, Query and Echo, spring Arthur Brown, aka the Clue Master, from the courthouse on his behalf. So what's going on here? What kind of diabolical plot are these two crude clue crooks concocting? Will they team up and together end the Batman once and for all? Well, not quite. You see, the Clue Master has nothing to do with this scheme. It's all Eddie Nygma. The Riddler is planning his latest masterpiece of a crime, and as an extra bonus, will get his revenge on the clueless Clue Master. After all, Eddie naturally resents Brown for stealing his gimmick. He thus decides to use him as part of a decoy. He straps a bomb vest to Brown and dumps him for Batman to find. Unless the Bat is able to solve a series of tedious riddles within a time limit, the bomb will go off, taking Clue Master and whichever block he's standing on with it. While Batman is busy with this mad goose chase, the Riddler is free to pull off his master crime. You just gotta love stories where these wannabe knockoffs are put in their place. Clue Master is just a poor man's Riddler after all, and it was completely pointless to create him in the first place. Here he for once serves a nice purpose. After all, if the character is a cheap knockoff, why not play that up? That's the only way they truly work. Besides Eddie's revenge plot on Brown, this comic is pretty much just another standard Riddler caper. There's nothing necessarily special about it. It's just Riddler being the Riddler, committing riddle crimes. But you know what? That's kinda what I like about it. Every now and then I just want a standard Riddler caper. That's what the character is about after all, riddle crimes. Not every single story has to do something groundbreaking with the character. Sometimes I just want to see the rogues do what they do. This is one of the better written Riddler capers too. This time around he really runs the Bat family ragged with his infuriating riddles. Plus it's always nice to see Query and Echo, Eddie's forgotten sexy hench girls. Whatever happened to them? This, alongside with their first appearance in Questions Multiply the Mystery, may actually be their most notable appearance. And finally, for overlooked Riddler comics, we've got When is a Riddle Not a Riddle? From Impulse 48, published in 1999. This one was written by Bill Messner-Loebs and penciled by Craig Rousseau. As most of us know, in 1999, Gotham City has suffered a massive earthquake and been declared a no man's land. A year-long arc thus followed. One villain who was oddly absent from that entire year-long arc though was the Riddler. So where was the Riddler during all that time? Well, he fled Gotham before the city was closed off. But where did he go? Well, he first went to Keystone, the city of the Flash, and teamed up with Captain Boomerang, which is a pretty good story too. After the duo was defeated, he went to Manchester, the city of Impulse, and that is the story we're talking about. Seeking revenge on the Flash, Eddie decides to challenge and totally humiliate his protege, Bart Allen aka Impulse. So he takes some random hostages, who just so happens to be members of Impulse's supporting cast, and lures the kid out. He then informs him that he's hidden bombs in the city, which will go off unless Impulse is able to solve a series of riddles and find them. It doesn't go quite as Eddie had expected though, as Impulse simply won't play his game. He doesn't need to solve any riddles, as with his super speed, he can simply search the entire city for the bombs in a few seconds, and he's too dumb to even know what a riddle is anyway. This is what happens when Eddie meets a speedster with the attention span of a fruit fly. So as you may have gathered, this comic is not particularly serious. I do have to confess that it does kinda make fun of the Riddler too. He is a bit of a joke. But then again, the entire story is one big joke, so that's why I am okay with it. Every now and then I don't mind my favorite supervillains being made fun of, if it's done within a comedic narrative, and if it's actually funny, which this story definitely is. Seeing Eddie get increasingly frustrated with the dim-witted yet super fast Impulse is pretty hilarious. I don't want to spoil too many of the jokes, so I think I'm gonna end it here. Suffice it to say, if you want to see Eddie made fun of in a genuinely funny way, then this story is it. So there you have it, 5 overlooked Riddler tales. As for a volume 2 for Eddie, I'm not sure that I can make one. He has surprisingly few good stories. Not as few as many people make it out to be, but nowhere near as many as say the Joker and Two-Face have, sadly enough. Well, anyway, as always, remember Arkham Asylum awaits you in the next video.